In this series, we're creating Ice Moon, an immersive experience for Apple Vision Pro. In today's episode, we'll build a prototype. We'll keep it as simple as possible with the goal of validating whether this experience feels compelling on device.
All right, let's see what we got.
When Will Wright got the idea to make The Sims, he started by building an actual dollhouse. This was followed by a series of prototypes that kit-bashed existing SimCity code. The Wright brothers spent years prototyping with kites and wind tunnels before their first successful flight. At its most basic level, a prototype lets us bring our ideas to life as quickly and as cheaply as possible. Today, we'll build a prototype using SideFX Houdini, Reality Composer Pro, and Xcode to answer the question of whether this environment feels compelling on device. All right, so today we're going to jump into SideFX Houdini to build a prototype of our Ice Moon environment. I love Houdini. It's what I'm comfortable working in. And one of the reasons is I love its procedural workflow. We're going to jump over to a different desktop here and go into the Solaris environment. And in Solaris is Houdini's USD authoring environment, the same format that Reality Composer Pro uses. And it's all about building a stage and creating a set, essentially. What we're going to do here is hit tab and create a component builder. And this is kind of the central theme of this whole Solaris workflow. So if I select this, we see that we have this component output with geo and material. And if you've used Reality Composer Pro, this hierarchy should look a little bit familiar. So we can rename this. I'm just going to call it Ice Moon Stage. And we'll call this Ice Moon Geo. And we can see that it's renamed here. We're going to jump into this Geo. So the first thing we're going to do is drop down a grid and plug it into this output here. Okay, so we have our grid and everything's in meters. And we've got this 10-meter grid. I'm going to make it 30 meters. I'm going to use a USD import, and we're going to bring in a little mannequin person that I made. It's a super simple object, but we're going to turn that on. And look what that does. Suddenly, before it was really hard to get a sense of scale of what this 30 meters feels like. But now that we have this person in there, immediately gives a sense of scale, and you start to feel what this environment's going to be like. We're going to call this near ground, and we're going to drop down a name node. Also call this near ground, and we actually have to type the name into this field here. So when we go back to the stage and we select our stage output and we expand geo, you can see we now have the component within there named near ground. In Reality Composer Pro, that'll let us actually manipulate those elements separately. And we're going to create another one. So I'm going to create a box here. This is going to be we're going to use boxes for our boulders. We're going to call this rock. I'm going to put a merge node here because we're going to do a bunch of rocks. And then this is going to be named near rocks. Now we'll merge this with the near ground as well. And now when we go back to our stage and we select geo, we'll see we now have near ground and near rocks. Use a transform node for each of these rocks. And I'm going to work with the concept art to just roughly place where these objects go. And occasionally go in from the user's perspective and kind of look around. What we're missing now is the wider expanse. We're going to drop another grid, and I think we're going to make it like 1,000 meters. All right, cool. We have a particularly fun element in this project, which is the planet. So let's just go ahead and do that now. See, this is what's fun about prototyping is we can get all this stuff in here today. And it's going to be really lo-fi. but it's fine because what we're going for is creating the expansiveness of this and defining the space. So this planet needs to be a lot bigger. Let's start with like, obviously the planet's bigger than 50 meters, but again, beyond this 30 meters, depth becomes really sort of irrelevant in terms of like stereoscopic perception. It just needs to look big on the horizon. See, I made the mistake of moving it at the object node. So I'm going to redo that, but this time I'm going to move it with this transform node. Okay. And the planet's supposed to be kind of low on the horizon. Not quite crossing it, I don't think. All right. Okay, this is why we prototype, because I have no idea if this is going to feel big enough in the scene. In fact, I'm going to bet that we'll want even bigger. So let's go 150. Move it up a little bit. Planet also has a disk. So we're going to merge together here. We can just use a cylinder today. Okay, this is a good illustration of why I like to use transform nodes rather than baking the transforms into the object itself. We were able to put this ring object, merge it together, and then they both get the transform, right? So that's just nice and convenient because we can make changes, but now we can move the whole thing together. And while we're at it, in our concept art, it is a bit on an angle like that. There we go. That's cool. I'm itching to try this out already because I think that's going to feel pretty spectacular. All right, let's keep going. I have from our concept art, I can see that behind this near ground, we actually have some way bigger, more, not mountains, but foothills, I guess, like bigger rocks behind the user here. We can use these little component boxes. So we've got like our ground, got our planet. All right, so now got all this, we need to do our geysers. Let's drop down cylinder. We're going to merge because we're going to have a few of these that go into the output, and it needs a name as well. So we're going to call this geysers. Now we're going to want the geyser geometry, like the crater around it, to be a separate name. So let's call this geyser craters. The cylinder is going to be a crater, and we're going to make the crater probably like 30 meters, and then we're going to transform that. And we're going to base this again off of the concept art. So we've got like one that's sort of like okay, so we got the craters, but we also need the plumes of gas that come out of the craters. So for that, I'm going to use another grid, but this time it's going to go up and down. And it's going to be tall. And I'm going to copy these transforms because we're going to place them where the craters are placed. So first one will go there. I'm going to merge these together, and we're going to call them gas plumes. Okay. And use the same one for each of these. So I could put the same grid in each of these transforms, merge them together, and voila. We've got our geysers. All right. Well, this is looking pretty good. I think like the other piece of geometry you are going to want is the Milky Way band that arcs over the entire experience. So let's go ahead and put it in. Let's put these into a group. Let's put these into a group. Okay. What I'm going to do is just take a grid and I'm going to bend it. Okay. All right, so we've created like a little arc, and I'm gonna transform it. I think this might be everything we need for now. So look at this, we've got a little set of our ice moon. I'm excited to go into this and see what this feels like. This looks pretty cool. Go back to our stage. We'll look, and we've got all of our objects. We go here, save to disk. And now we've got our USD assets, so we can bring these into Reality Composer Pro. All right, back from some coffee, and now ready for the second part of this, where we're gonna actually bring this into Reality Composer Pro and then see what this looks like on device. So we're gonna go into Xcode first and create a new project. I'm gonna choose visionOS, immersive environment app, and we call it Ice Moon. And you'll want to set up your own developer account on Apple if you're going to be building this yourself. My company Apposite is already set up. So I'm going to leave everything as is. We have a full immersive space. You could also do progressive where you could turn the dial. For now, we'll just stick to full. Do next and create project. What we want to really pay attention to is the immersive view. And basically, this is going to fetch our Reality Composer Pro content and load it into our immersive space when the user taps on that button. That content is created for us automatically. You can see Reality Kit content. So we can show this in Finder, and we can just open up Reality Composer Pro from here. Okay, and so by default, we have this scene. They put like this video test material in here. We don't need any of this. We might use the sky dome, but for now, I'm actually gonna deactivate that as well. And we're just gonna delete this video doc. So we've got an empty scene now. The first thing we wanna do is import our USD file that we made in Houdini. So we're gonna open up the Finder, and I have it on the desktop. And if we open that up, we'll see it's a folder containing a few different USD files. So we don't have to worry too much about what all these mean just yet. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, let's just drag the whole folder into Reality Composer Pro. I'm going to open that up, and we look for the one called Ice Moon Stage.usd, and we can drag that into the root. Okay, so now it's in here, but it looks super weird, right? Because there's no materials applied. So we could, for simplicity's sake, just go and at the top level geo, we can assign a material to everything. And so for today, we're just going to do that. And we'll just create a new material, and we can just create a physically based material, and we'll call it temp material. And then we'll go to our geo, and in material bindings, we're just going to select the temp material. and now it applies it to everything. We are eventually going to bake our lighting into the scene, and that's going to allow us to get some really nice, subtle shading and effects. But for today, we're going to use one of Reality Composer's lights, because in the concept art, we have this kind of directional light that starts from behind this planet and points towards the user. So the whole scene is kind of backlit. So we can go to the root, hit the plus button, and we'll add a light. We're going to create a directional light. If we manipulate the light, we can change the direction of it. So like I said, we actually want it to be coming from kind of this direction. You can see how it's silhouetting the planet. Now, Reality Composer Pro also has its own kind of like environment lighting. So that's adding some kind of ambient light to this as well. I think what's likely to happen is when we open this on device, it might be completely dark except for stuff illuminated from this backlight. So we'll see. But now we have a basic light. We've got our elements in there. You'll notice that the Milky Way band is not really visible. And the reason for that is likely because the geometry is one-sided. So if you look at our material, go to temp material, there's an option on face culling. So if we said none, now we see that, because now it's not going to get rid of faces that are pointing away from the viewer. We have basically like a paper cutout version of our scene, enable shadows. We're going to leave it, but let's leave it by default and see what happens. But I think what's happening is we're getting this like big shadow from this Milky Way object, which we don't want. Let's see what happens if we turn that off. Okay. So then we at least get some shadows going on our objects, and we'll probably see these better in the device itself. But we got our basic like backlighting here. We've got a bit of a silhouette on the planet. I think this is good enough that we should just run this now and see what this is feeling like on device. Okay, so we're going to save this. I'm going to go back over to Xcode, and we're pretty much all set. So I'm just going to hit build and run, and it's going to take a second. And then, oh, wow. Compositionally, this feels really cool, and it just feels like a huge space. Tell already this is going to be a lot of fun.